truthfulness is one of the pillars of um, it is. I'll read the purport. Very interestingly, Prabhupada has so beautifully mentioned the four pillars of principles of religion, which are compassion, austerity, mercy, and truthfulness. And in the purport of 1:1732, he writes it like this: the principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, as we've already discussed, may be followed by the follower of any faith. There is no need to turn from Hindu to Mohammedan, Christian, etc. The Bhagavatam religion urges following the principles of religion. The principles of religion are not the dogmas or regulative principles of a certain faith. Such regulative principles may be different in terms of time and place concerned. One has to see whether the aims of religion have been achieved. And therefore, Prabhupada used to always mention the Bhagavatam is talking about Sanatan Dharma. The Bhagavatam is always telling us about the the uh, the nature of the soul, and not telling us an external imposition, not telling us something which is exter externally we have to do. Bhakti is not something we have to learn. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoy Shravanadhi Shuddha Chitte Karaye Udoy. That Krishna Prema is already in the heart, and simply by the process of Shravan, Adi, etc., the nine processes of bhakti, it is just going to be uncovered. It's just going to, it's going, the dormant capacity, like a child, the dormant capacity to walk is already there. And only by practice, the child starts walking. It's not that he learned to walk, it's just that it was already there. It was just brought out by the process of purification through practice. Similarly, our dormant bhakti is going to be brought out. And to bring out that dormant bhakti, because it's already there and therefore doesn't have to be learned, there are no really um, different things. He simply has to practice these principles of religion, no matter which faith he belongs to. And then very easily he can make progress. And of the four and therefore the pillars of religion form these four regulative principles. And the pillar of truthfulness is protected by the principle of no gambling. And this no gambling is, I just had two recent experiences in two people's lives where both of them got involved with not casinos or something like that. They're both working, one in India and one here in New York. Both very well to do, very well educated, one a devotee and one not. And somehow they got involved, and pretty much the same story. Both a devotee and not, both well to do, both completely, both having families with children, with responsibility, etc. Both knowing that the harms of gambling. And I think both of them had never, perhaps, just sometimes out of entertainment, but never done it seriously. And both of them one day sitting at home on their computer screen, small pop-up came saying, invest $100 and make it 150 in 10 minutes. How? By day trading, speculative business practice. This is what Prabhupada writes, if we'll see in the other purport. And it is day trading is where you invest in the stock market, and it's not based on any intelligence. It's just based on the hope that it looks like, when these figures, you can see all the stocks going up and down, and when it goes up 2 points, I sell and I make quick money. And that is so addictive. And when both of them spoke to me, and when initially I heard it, I couldn't even really understand how can this be addictive. And they both made a lot of money, and they got so addicted that by the end of it, one of them has a huge loan and he doesn't know anymore what he's going to do with his life. And the other one sold his wife's share of whatever he could get. And now there is a crisis at home. And just because of this um, untruthful, not following the pillar of truthfulness, which leads to, especially this one, which is gambling, which we know of, which is the attraction to anything quick, anything easy, anything which is going to give me a shortcut, which I can avoid the law of karma in the active sense that I have to do action, and then when I deserve the result, I will get it. Anything which I can avoid that hard work, avoid the doing part, but just the getting part. And so that became so addictive. So that's one reason why, and I'm sure we all know so many stories of perhaps those who've been ruined by this principle of um, gambling. And so therefore this pillar of truthfulness is such an important pillar. Let's see where else Prabhupada spoke about this. So he speaks about this so beautifully in the principles of religion, which then form the four regulative principles. And because we are on that topic, I used to always wonder, where do the four regulative principles actually come in the Bhagavatam or in our literature? So in 1:17:38, where Parikshit Maharaj has confronted Kali, who in the form of a king was breaking the legs of the bull of Dharma, and the legs were the four pillars of religion, and he's breaking all of them. And when he's confronted and stopped, at that time Kali then kind of emotionally blackmails. Now, I don't know whether that's called an emotional blackmail, but he knows the soft corner of this king, and being a king, it's his magnanimity. It's just in his heart to give shelter to everyone. And so Kali says, wait, I am also your citizen. At the end of the day, okay, I did this, I'm sorry, okay, but I'm your citizen. I am also in need of shelter and protection. Give me somewhere to stay. You can't just drive me. I also need some place. And then Shukdev goes, and then Parikshit gives him four places to stay. And in this text, he says, Dyutam, Panam, Striyam, Shunam, and which are, the translation reads, Maharaj Parikshit, being petitioned by the personality of Kali, gave him permission to reside in places where gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter were performed. And therefore, these places become the residence of Kali. And once Kali comes into our, by making contact with Kali, then everything else follows. And Kali comes in, we can almost imagine whatever best horror or sci-fi movies we've seen, where someone gets, he's completely engulfed by this presence of this other personality. Yeah, it's almost like being haunted by, being completely influenced then by the age of Kali. In fact, Kali is so powerful. There's one incident where Duryodhan almost gives up. Only once it happened. He almost decided, I think I don't want the kingdom. And suddenly there appeared the personification of Kali. And Kali said, my dear Duryodhan, I am empowering you. And Kali kind of showed him Kali's universal form. Of course, Krishna's universal form is the only universal form. But Kali kind of displays to him his power, which we read about in the Bhagavatam's 12th chapter of predictions for the age of Kali, where Vyasadeva makes the predictions, which today when we read it, it's like, some of them don't surprise me because I thought, oh, I'm so used to this. You know what he's saying, seeing, he talks about fashion, he talks about what will be standards of success and this and that. And some of them were surprising in the sense, wow, yes, they from that culture and that age could actually look really, when they say they're three darshis, they can see the past, present, and future, these great souls, how he could look in the future and see exactly what will be this age and what will be the standards of living and what will be the meaning of the word prosperity, right? Where there's no more, there's not a gold standard, there's a plastic standard, and where relationships are simply so superficial and easy to break, and all these things he talks about. So so in this way, Kali showed Duryodhan his massive universal power. And then Duryodhan got convinced. He said, oh, you are on my side? Okay, I'm going back. I think I still have a chance. I think I can easily defeat Dharma. That's what he knew. He's actually up against Dharma, which cannot be defeated. But by seeing the power of Kali, he again got convinced that if this guy is on my side with all his darkness, with all his power, I can definitely defeat Dharma. So we can just imagine how this, and that's why Prabhupada created this beautiful, protective, and in the Bhagavad Gita, when Prabhupada talks about the four regulative principles, he calls them the principles of freedom, the regulative principles of freedom. That's the word he uses. So it's quite interesting. He doesn't talk about them as confined or rules or something. He talks about them as principles of freedom, because actually they free the soul to then he can really choose whatever. He's not no longer, his choices are no longer haunted or no longer influenced by these um, powerful pulls, but now he can really choose and really desire freely and really experience and express truly happy life at the level of the soul, and even material standards, he can be truly happy. Okay, so that's how Prabhupada talks about the four regulative principles. And just a side point, in that same purport, Prabhupada gives Prabhupada's perhaps what is it called, the Declaration of Independence, or whatever was the first constitution which was written, memorandum of right, Bill of Rights, or whatever that was. And he gives three principles, and he talks about how society should be stuck, what a government should do, and he gives a guarantee. If society wants to be free, one of the points is, if society wants to be absolutely free from corruption, then he talks about truthfulness and taking out gambling houses and no speculative business enterprise. That's where he writes it, and how it should be. And even the other points are so interesting. I was thinking that's how actually all of Prabhupada's communities are actually built around these exact principles and exactly what he's talking about. So that was Prabhupada's constitution. In the same line, in 11741, Prabhupada talks about truthfulness as the basic principle of all religion. And he says, in other places in the Bhagavatam, he's talking about, by strict adherence to the prescribed principles for all orders of social life, one can attain the qualities of truthfulness by strict adherence to the prescribed principles. So that means one thing is that yes, truthfulness is 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 a virtue, is, and Prabhupada recognizes it for us Kali Yuga Vasis, residents, to be quite difficult at times. Because at one place, Prabhupada says, how can you do business without being in the black market? Or in the sense, when you do business, you have to lie, you have to exaggerate things, you have to hide profits, you have to do whatever you have to do. And that's the only way you can do business. So, but he says, by the strict adherence to the prescribed principles, one can attain the qualities of truthfulness. And in one place, I was really trying to search for a shloka or something for this, but uh, maybe someone can authenticate it also. I have heard that uh, uh, the Brahmana's curses They were so powerful because they followed the principle of truthfulness and because they only spoke the truth, especially when for 12 years one has only spoken the truth, then whatever he speaks must come true because he's kind of owned that principle of truthfulness. It's really become his. It's he's really so exemplified and embodied it that now he gets that power of Satyavaka. That's of course the description of Krishna, Satyavaka, Satya Sankalpa. But a person also gets that power, and that is how we know that even a little boy like Shringi could curse and cause the death of the great king Parikshit because he did follow that principle and the power of truthfulness. So and that's why in India also, to this day, people go to great sadhus and just say, bless me. There's this sweet incident with Prabhupada. He was once in a train in India, and these two businessmen were really bugging the servants that let us in, Swamiji blessing, because they knew that this is a real saint. If he says, may you be successful, or may your business do, or whatever, it has to come true. That's a spiritual shortcut to hard work, and that's also actually what all these great demons did. Hiranyakashipu knew my power is nothing, but if I get the benediction of Brahma, Ravana thought this is much greater than whatever I can do with my skill development and strategy and politics. And this, I'll just directly ask for their power of their Shakti. So Prabhupada was being chased by these two, and again and again he said, no, go away, no, no, no. And finally Prabhupada got so irritated. He knew what they're here for. Finally said, call them in. And he said, I bless you that your material life is finished. And then they got so worried. They said, Swamiji, no, 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 Swamiji, what are you saying? Please, sorry, Swamiji, don't say that. But yes, that so yeah, so truthfulness for 12 years has this kind of power. Um, I also read one of the things which Prabhupada talks about in truthfulness. So in the purport of uh, Bhagavad Gita 10.4.5, 10.4 and 5, he writes, truthfulness means that facts should be presented as they are for the benefit of others. Facts should not be misrepresented. According to social conventions, it is said that one can speak the truth only when it is palatable to others, but that is not truthfulness, he's saying. The truth should be spoken in a straightforward way so that others will understand actually what the facts are. If a man is a thief and if people are warned that he's a thief, that is truth. And we really see this, especially from when we share bhakti, when we, in a sense, if we take the position of leading someone and guiding someone and wanting someone to follow what we say, then this principle becomes so important because then we can't cheat them by not telling them the complete truth or by not saying that, oh, that person is not the right place you should go to. Of course, in a nice way to say it. Um, so that's Prabhupada talking about. And another thing he talks about is how this one thing which I'm just going to say comes for as the description of innumerable devotees in the Bhagavatam. But one example is when Narad Muni glorifies Vyasadev as the perfect recipient and the perfect um, uh, speaker of spiritual wisdom. He says, "You are firm in vow and situated in truthfulness." And he gives that as such a prominent quality of Vyasdev. So by my hope of this presentation so far was to on myself and all of us to impress upon our hearts the importance of this quality and to try to fulfill it, to try to follow it to the best of our ability, knowing its importance, knowing how much stress has been given to it, knowing how much it can protect us and actually benefit us and help us, knowing the power of truthfulness. I just wanted to speak on one more thing connected to truthfulness, which is Krishna's truthfulness, which is from a bhakti angle. So in Bhagavatam, first canto, Krishna's 40 qualities are described, and it begins with in him reside truthfulness, cleanliness, intolerance. So, of course, Krishna is perfectly truthful. Whatever, you know, he definitely embodies, he's the source of all these qualities, as he will say in the Bhagavad Gita, that from me come truthfulness. There's all these qualities. And yet, Krishna's ultimate quality, just like if you remember the 26 qualities of the devotee, the main quality of the devotee is said that he is fully surrendered to Krishna. And that quality is considered the queen, and all the other qualities are considered the maid servants, because wherever the queen goes, the maid servants will go. And it's also good to know that in case some of the other qualities we don't have, but if we have this one, the queen quality, surrender to Krishna, then all the maid servants will follow. They will develop in our hearts. So, although um, truthfulness is one of Krishna's qualities, and just like for a devotee, surrender to Krishna is the highest, and he can be actually all the other qualities sometimes become subservient to that principle. He may not follow some of them, but he's always following this one. Similarly, for Krishna, Bhakta Vatsalya is his number one quality. Just like for, so it's so beautiful that in the path of in bhakti, as devoted and as intense is the love and service of a devotee to Krishna, the same is Krishna's surrender in a sense to his devotee. His his love and his absolute surrender in service to his devotee, and that quality becomes supreme to all others. And in regards to truthfulness, when in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the great Mahajan, Bhishma Dev, finally falls on the battlefield of Kurukshetra after perhaps 180 or 220 years. Krishna was 125, Arjuna is 125. Bhishma is 3 or 4 generations before them. He's still fighting and still he's the best warrior, unmatched warrior on that battlefield. So perhaps he's at that point 180. I don't know, I've heard different, some say he was 300 at that time, whatever. So he's really old. And finally, and he definitely was like the one of the centerpieces of the entire battle, and of all the kings, the most famous person, the most truthful person, and Bhishma Dev, everyone knew his glories. And finally he falls, and the entire battle for that one day stopped little much before the dusk, when usually the battle would stop, and everyone dropped their weapons and everyone came to honor the passing of this great, um, not just a king but definitely a great saint, everyone knew. And at that point, when everyone assembled and Bhishma Dev begins to speak, and he begins to, first he gives one of the big sections in the Mahabharata is Bhishma's instructions to Yudhishthir. At this stage, dying with blood completely drained from his body, he's talking about what is the king's dharma, what is Stri dharma, what is how to raise a kingdom, what should a citizen do, what are the duties, all these things he elaborates. And then in the end is the part which comes in the Bhagavatam, where he finally says, now I'm done with my duty. And now, very rarely did Bhishma express his true bhakti for Krishna. And he even tells Yudhishthir that, do you know this man, Krishna, Adyo Narayana Puman? And he's the Adi Narayan, and he's just bewildering all of us by walking amongst us like he's one of us, like he's one of our relatives, one of our friends. But he's the Adi Narayan. And he goes on to glorify Krishna. And then he says that one day, I mean, in the battle, I took a vow one day that I will kill all the Pandavas the next day with these 5 arrows. I put all my power in these 5 arrows. And by Krishna's arrangement, What actually happened was Duryodhan goes up to Bhishma the previous on the ninth day of the battle, and he says, "Grandfather, you partial man, I know what you're doing. You're holding back. You're on my side, but you're not fighting strong enough. How can you?" And Duryodhan was frustrated because he knew this man can finish the battle in one day. Why is he not using his power? And he knew that it's because he actually has a soft corner for the Pandavas. And Duryodhan said, "This is no way to, this is not a Kshatriya dharma. You can keep your emotions aside. I know you love them more than me, but now you're on my side. You fight for me, you fight with all your strength." He really chastised Bhishma. And Bhishma peacefully said, "All right, give me 5 arrows." And Duryodhan brought 5 arrows. And he said, "I will invest all my power of all these years of whatever I have in these 5 arrows. And tomorrow, each of the Pandavas will die with these 5 arrows." And Duryodhan was thrilled. He knew, okay, now this is something. Got the 5 arrows, Bhishma put the power. And Krishna, if we all are aware of Krishna Leela, he rarely used his godliness. He functioned within, just out of Leela, out of pastime's sake, he functioned within our constraints of human limitations. So he didn't really use his god powers. But at this point, it was so serious. He suddenly just tells Arjuna, "Go and ask for charity from Duryodhan." And Arjuna says, "What? Why?" Ego issues. I'm not just going walking up for charity. What do you want me to ask the kingdom? He said, "No, ask for the 5 arrows which Bhishma has just given him." And because there was uh, a pending ask which Arjuna had to ask from Duryodhan for something, I forget why. And so Arjuna said, "Oh, okay, that's something. What are these 5 arrows?" And Krishna exactly tells him what they are. And Arjuna is afraid. And then Arjuna goes to Duryodhan and says, "Well, you owe me something." And Duryodhan said, "Yes. What have you come for? The kingdom? This? What do you want?" And Arjuna says, "Give me the 5 arrows." And Duryodhan is shocked. He said, "How did you even know?" But he had to keep his word, so he gave him the 5 arrows. So Krishna got really desperate at that time, knowing Bhishma's power. And then Duryodhan comes back that night into Bhishma's tent and again chastises, "Did you tell them? What was the use of making those 5 arrows? I'm sure you told them." And Krishna arranged, and Bhishma said, Bhishma smiled. And within his heart, Bhishma was so happy because even while making those 5 arrows, his only thought was, "Krishna, I want to see what you're going to do now. I want to see how you do so much to protect your devotees. Let me see what you're going to do now." And Bhishma was thrilled. And then Bhishma said, "All right, Duryodhan, I take a vow. I take a vow that either tomorrow I will kill Arjuna or Krishna will have to break his vow to pick up weapons in the battle." And now again Duryodhan said, "Okay, now let's see what happens." And now again Bhishma smiled, thinking, "Now, Krishna, let's see what you will do. You took a vow at the beginning of this battle that you're going to be neutral. You're not going to pick up a weapon. You don't belong to either party. You're just going to drive a chariot." And chariot drivers were considered neutral. Nobody, sometimes in battle they were killed, but nobody went out to kill them. They were neutral. And so the next day, Bhishma fought like he had never fought before, and he wiped out in the Mahabharata. There are details of how many people these great warriors used to wipe out in minutes. Their heads flying here, there, and with all his power, he's attacking. And then he turned his full attention to Arjuna. And for the first time in his life, Arjuna actually faced the real Bhishma. Because in the previous days and in the Battle of Virat, Bhishma's soft corner, he couldn't really fight with Arjuna. And now, when he really saw Bhishma's power, Arjuna was completely overwhelmed. And within a matter of no time, everyone was looking and everyone thought it's over. It's game over. Arjuna is gone. They practically couldn't see him in that barrage of arrows and weapons and celestial. And now it was just moments before, and Krishna had to make his choice. And at that time, uh, Bhishma, in glorification of Krishna, spoke this beautiful verse. He says, "Swanigamam apahaya matpratigyam atam adhikartumamaplato." And he says, "Swanigamam apahaya mat pratigyam." He said in his heart, Krishna is ultimately a devotee of his devotees. And because I had taken a vow that I will either kill Arjuna or Krishna will have to break his vow, Krishna now was uh, was torn between his own vow and my vow, right? Because Krishna could have just protected Arjuna without like, "Meh," and he could have just said, Bhishma, your vow is useless, because Krishna had that power. But Krishna decided, no, I will break my own vow so that my devotee's vow is preserved. And with that, he jumped off the chariot and breaks the the wheel of the chariot, and he rushes with all anger, real anger, towards Bhishma Dev. And actually, this scene is then what Bhishma wants to leave his body with. In the last part of these shlokas, which Bhishma will give, he says, Rathangapani. He says, "Oh my dear Krishna, oh Chakradhari, oh Rathangapani, may this vision of yours may always remain in front of my eyes. That you are," because that was the rasa which they were in, Virya Ras, a very unique rasa. That Bhishma and Krishna were in the chivalrous mellow, and therefore when Krishna picked up this chariot, and now uh, um, Bhishma is saying, "May this vision of yours always remain in my eyes, and may you." Um, and that's where, and actually Bhishma is still shooting him with the arrows while Krishna was running towards him, and Arjuna jumps off the chariot and holds on to Krishna. He says, "No, you took a vow, you took a vow, how can you do this? No, don't." And as Bhishma was shooting arrows through Krishna's body, and blood is coming out of Krishna's body, and then it is described that those arrows which Bhishma was shooting into Krishna, piercing Krishna's body, were actually more, were as loving, and Krishna just felt like his mother's loving touch, because it was the love of his devotee in Virya Ras. And the blood coming out was just special effects, because Krishna's body is Satchidananda. But if he says, "Oh, I'm Satchidananda, sorry, too bad, no blood," then there's no fun in the fight. There is no rasa, there's no Virya Ras happening there. And so that's how Krishna's truthfulness is subservient to his main principle of uh, love for his devotees. But of course, we sometimes may use also an excuse for our truthfulness, but we should be, and sometimes it's justified, where we may need to bend the truth to ultimately serve the topmost principle of surrender to Krishna. But we have to be very sincere, and then, and with perhaps with due consultation, sometimes we can consider it. But at least in day-to-day life, it's an un, unbreakable principle. The words are not even coming out because I break this principle so often, but it is unbreakable principle of truthfulness. Thank you very much.